Why were these Agatha Christie film adaptations never produced? Imagine a world where some of the most intriguing stories by Agatha Christie never made it to the big screen. You might wonder why certain books or stories, full of mystery and clever plots, never got their Hollywood moment. Well, the reasons are quite practical and rooted in the realities of filmmaking and audience expectations. First, some novels like Death Comes as the End are set in ancient Egypt, with characters of color in a time period that is very different from the usual European settings. Making a film in such a setting would require a big budget for costumes, sets, and historical accuracy. Plus, casting a largely non-white cast in a period piece was less common and more expensive at the time. Studios often hesitated because these stories lacked the familiar characters like Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple, which audiences love. Without those well-known detectives, it was harder to attract viewers and secure funding. Then there are stories like Postern of Fate, which were written later in Christie's life. These stories are often considered weaker because they lack the sharp suspense and pace of her earlier work. They tend to be slower, with less engaging plots, making them less exciting for movie audiences. Producers want stories that keep viewers on the edge of their seats, and these late works just didn't fit that bill. Another big factor is Agatha Christie's own attitude towards adaptations. She was often cautious and sometimes unhappy with how her stories were changed on screen. She preferred to have control over her work, and when filmmakers altered her characters or storylines too much, she felt betrayed. For example, the film Murder Ahoy was a commercial failure, and Christie was upset because the script strayed from her original ideas. This tension made studios hesitant to adapt her work without her approval, especially for stories she didn't feel comfortable with. Some stories are also very complex, with many locations or intricate plots. Films need a clear and straightforward narrative to keep viewers engaged. Stories like They Came to Baghdad involve multiple exotic settings, which can be very costly and difficult to film. The expense of building sets or filming in different countries often made studios think twice before taking on these projects. Finally, audience expectations play a big role. Fans of classic detective stories want familiar characters and a certain tone. If a story doesn't have the recognizable detective or doesn't follow the typical mystery formula, studios worry it won't do well. They fear disappointing fans or not attracting enough viewers to justify the costs. So, in the end, these stories were often left unproduced because of a mix of high costs, creative disagreements, and the challenge of meeting audience desires. Some stories just didn't fit the commercial mold or were too difficult to bring to life on screen. That's why we see only a select few of Christie's works turned into movies, while others remain as books and stories for readers to enjoy.